Hey everyone, this is Francesco Abbruzzino with the Scoop News. This guy you see on the screen is a professor at FGCU, William Mitz. And I love one of his sayings, which he says is fertilizer, the opioid of agriculture. And he gave a speech. He gave a speech down there on just a couple of days ago at the University of Kapnick's Center in Naples. And the Northport Sun ran a pretty good article on it. I read it, and I looked at this guy's credentials. You'll see some of his credentials underneath this. If you're on YouTube, just go to my page. And they covered basically him and Red Tide and what he believes is it's all about. He's a wetlands engineer. He's got a lot of credentials. That particular college has been studying a lot on Red Tide. I've been posting a few things lately about them. They've been pretty active. And he's been looking at the whole nitrate, the fertilizer, the opioid to agriculture. He says there's no smoking gun, but the data he has is provocative. He says that he ranks nitrogen fertilizer as the primary source for feeding into the algae in Red Tide. His results of his studies of the rare isotope of nitrogen from water samples provides the backup to that. He says that the results basically show that nitrogen fertilizer ranks above septic waste, ammonium fertilizer, nitrates in the air, and all that other good stuff in terms of Red Tide. So I know here in Venice, actually Sarasota County, but particularly in Venice, I think they've been focusing a lot on septic tanks, over 5,000 of them. Maybe I'll put some of those articles at the bottom here. But it goes beyond that. It's the fertilizer. And in Venice, they had to pass a resolution strongly suggesting people not use it. And I read all the emails coming in. There was a lot of resistance. It seemed organized, but a lot of resistance. People wanted to continue fertilizing. They didn't care about the information that's out there. He went in, he talked about how red tide is naturally occurring saltwater algae. He said, but scientists are increasingly acknowledging the fact out there that human development is making it worse. That's obvious. We all know that. I don't need a degree. Yet scientists, they just don't want to come to that conclusion, many of them. A lot of his findings, a lot of his assertions contradict that of Mote in a publication they put out back in 2014, where they looked at some water samples and studied isotopes of nitrogen. Mote's research basically stated that there was no smoking gun, that red tide, like all forms of nitrogen, is out there. They like every single one out there, but he says no, it's mainly the fertilizer ones. Mitch and there's other person, Brand, that was there. They predicted that the Okeechobee Reservoir, that there would be a failure of that reservoir out at, say, South Lake Okeechobee, which is concerning. Not sure how he's getting that information, why he's predicting that. If he has some kind of inside knowledge, who knows? But this is a reservoir that's supposed to prevent any crippling outbreaks of the blue-green algae. It basically sequesters the algae instead of releasing it to the east and west of Florida. That algae is believed to be to feed into the red tide and help it to evolve and get worse and all that stuff. But basically, this Mitch guy is blaming the Southwest Water Management District in South Florida, their counterparts. Environmentalists, as we all know, blame the sugar industry. The sugar industry says we have nothing to do with it. Mitch did praise the scientists around there, specifically the ones building the wetlands. He says that we need to go even further, to the tune of 14 times more wetlands than that of which is currently planned out there. We can only, he says, with the water and cleaning it up, we can only do that by removing the nitrogen and phosphorus. And slow climate change by storing carbon. Not sure how that plays into it. Back to agriculture, which he says is the opioid. Fertilizer, he said you could function without fertilizer. And basically he said that the fields are segmented into sections that constantly cycle between the growing commercial groups and growing wetlands. Wetlands store the algae, causing the nitrogen and the phosphorus, releasing the fertilizer during the crop cycle. He said it just happens to have, Mitch, just happens to have the kits engineered to turn fields into wetland and back again into growing commercial crops. He said basically there's no buy-in. The federal government doesn't know about this. He says if you approach them, they're probably not going to do anything, but they need to wake up. But again, he attributes all this, and I guess it contradicts what, in some form, what Modi's putting out there, that fertilizer is the opioid to agriculture. And just to recap, it's basically the fertilizer you're laying out on your lawns, the fertilizer that so many people have fought against here in Venice, banning, and they want those green lawns out there. So it was pretty interesting. He has a sampling of nitrogen. Let me go back to this is an article that the Sun wrote that I'm looking at now, and they got some sampling from nitrogen. It says they found through analysis and taken in August of 2018, the Gulf of Mexico at the southwest Florida with red tide, they found nitrogen fertilizer. Gulf of Mexico at southwest Florida without red tide, they found marine nitrates. Caloosahatchee, they found manure and septic tank water soil ammonium fertilizers. Lake Okeechobee, manure and septic soil ammonium fertilizer, fish plant waste nitrates. Naples rainfall, atmospheric nitrogen. This is all, if you want to research it, his name's William Mitch. Again, I said I'll put his credentials below, but it's a presentation he did in January 10th. So basically, he's saying that the Gulf of Mexico, southwest Florida, with red tide, he found nitrogen fertilizer, which was driving it, and that's what he's attributing to a lot of this, more so than septic waste and all the other factors. What was it? Septic waste, different factors. I can't remember. I covered them all earlier. So interesting article. If you want to learn more about him, I think I put a link to his page over there at the college, and you can get more information. This has been Francesco Abbruzzino with The Scoop.